All right, good morning. Was that a little loud for the night after the party? How's everybody doing? Good. You enjoying the week? You ready for one, maybe two last sessions? Well, I wanted to welcome you today to DVO315. My name is Henry Hahn. I lead product for the monitoring services for AWS. And I'm really excited to see everybody here today. I'm going to jump in and we'll go through some of what we're going to talk about. But real quickly, how many of you are running on AWS today in some form or another? Okay, I'll call that a majority. How many of you use CloudWatch today? Okay, so today I'm actually going to walk through CloudWatch integrations with CloudWatch. If you're already familiar with CloudWatch, you'll probably see some new things. I'll go over a few things that you're not. If you're not familiar with CloudWatch, that's okay. I'm going to go over the same things. For those of you familiar, you might pick out some of the new things. All right. So what are we going to talk about today? First of all, just real quickly, why we monitor. There's some obvious reasons and sometimes not so obvious reasons, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how CloudWatch helps you there and the tools that you have in AWS. I'm going to talk through some of the new features and updates. We made some announcements. We've made announcements over the last year since I gave a similar talk last year. We made some announcements a few weeks ago, and we actually made an announcement yesterday. So we'll talk about some of those. And I'm going to combine those and try to create what I'll call the getting the most out of CloudWatch possible. I'm going to spend a little time talking about custom logs processing. Logs is a central part of monitoring. We've introduced a logging capability in the last little over a year. We've added a bunch of features. We've taken feedback and really added some new capabilities that let you do even more. And I do have demos. It's actually, I think I'm going to show more demo slides or demo stuff than I am of slides. I'm a bigger fan of demos than slides, but I am going to use a few slides. So let's go ahead and get started. So why should we monitor? I think many of you, if you're already monitoring, this is maybe a no-duck question. For those of you who are new to monitoring, you probably have a good idea of why we want to monitor, and I'm going to talk about some of those. But just real quickly, most of you have some form of an application that you're running. You could have an internal application, an externally facing application. It could be an end-user focused application, a web application. It could be a service that's actually connecting with other services. No matter what it is, somebody cares. So hopefully, success for you means that people are using your applications in some form or other. So that's actually what you want, right? And you probably want more, especially if your application is a revenue-generating application. As applications have moved to the cloud, as more applications use more components, the complexity of the systems that you're actually running has increased, and there's a lot of dynamics to that system, right? Network latencies can change depending on what's going on. The way that your users are interacting with those systems can change, and that's why you need to monitor. Now, most of you probably think, I don't know what I did there. Most of you probably think monitoring is about this case, right? Something goes wrong, somebody gets paged, and you got to respond. That is certainly part of monitoring, but monitoring is also about preventing some of that as well. So for those of you who have done monitoring for a long time, you may be well aware of many of these cases, but I'll quickly go over them. The first reason that we monitor is really about that customer experience. Now again, the customer could be your end users, internal or external, or they could be other systems that are interconnected. And you need to know, are you providing the experience that those customers need, expect, want? A few years ago, there was an article, and I think this was sourced from Amazon data, that talked about the impact of latency, even milliseconds of latency, on Amazon retail revenue. This was several years ago, but I think it's probably become somewhat common knowledge that latency is very critical to that customer experience. So you want to know, what is the customer experiencing? Another purpose for monitoring is managing your performance and your cost, right? You get good customer experience typically when your performance is better. Performance and cost are related. You need more resources to achieve the same job, that's going to cost you more. But if you can do it efficiently, you're going to save money and give your customers a better experience. Sometimes, in fact many times, there's a trend to your data, right? If you want more customers on your site and you're doing a good job of adding features, there may be a trend over time that says, no, I'm actually adding users all the time. Monitoring data can give you an insight into what that looks like. Maybe you can even start planning ahead for the needs that you have in the future. When a problem does occur, you need to know quickly where it happened, right? Monitoring helps you drill in on that information. Was it a problem with your own application code? Was it a problem with networking? Was it a problem with a database query? There are lots of reasons. That's what monitoring provides, and it helps you resolve the problem as quickly as possible. And of course, we want to continue to improve our applications. We don't want to get that same page again, so we learn what went wrong, we fix it, we maybe add some more monitoring, and we continue to improve our system. So very quickly, that's what monitoring is about. That's why we monitor. And there are many other cases. I didn't touch them all, but that's some of the most common ones that I see. Now, Amazon provides you a platform for monitoring, a product. It's Amazon CloudWatch. There are a few other pieces of CloudWatch that I'll talk about today that are not directly in CloudWatch, but Amazon CloudWatch is the platform and service that helps you monitor your AWS services and applications. And what that means is we provide metric data, we provide notifications and alarms, we provide log data and log monitoring, and we also provide a lot of integrations with other AWS services. I'll talk about some of those integrations today, but as an example, remember I was talking about the dynamic nature of your systems. You may have trends, you may have cycles. For example, if you have a weekly or daily cycle or an event-based cycle, you may want to scale up your compute resources. Auto-scaling uses CloudWatch metrics to perform scaling. Maybe it's based on CPU utilization, some worker queue depth, any of those things. So there's a lot of integration with CloudWatch. Now, before I was putting this talk together, I was thinking, well, I should put up all the symbols and logos for all the services that have metrics, and I found a much easier way to do that. For those of you not familiar, that's the AWS console. CloudWatch provides metrics for nearly all services. One of the newest ones that we added was S3. There are actually metrics for S3. Those of you who've been looking for S3 metrics for a while hopefully appreciate that now. But generally, we cover all services now. There are hundreds of metrics. There may be thousands at this point. I haven't counted them recently. That you don't even have to enable. It's just working, right? They just get turned on. They're sent to CloudWatch. So you're going to get this information effectively as in sort of call it an agent in the sky without any configuration. So there's a lot of stuff that you get out of the box. Let's see here. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was logging. We introduced logging about 1.5 years ago. Now for logging, what we mean is we're actually letting you send your log data to us. We'll monitor, store it, let you search it, navigate it, centrally aggregate it. At high volume, you don't have to worry about scaling. We handle file rotation, all those sorts of things. But we also have been providing log data from services. So for example, earlier this year, we introduced VPC flow logs. So you can now see what's happening against your VPCs, which was a big customer request that we've had. We've added a number of others. API Gateway added logs. You can actually access the API Gateway logs. Lambda, CloudTrail, there are a number of others. This all falls under the CloudWatch umbrella, and it's stuff that you can access through these services. Okay. I think for the most part, I'm done talking about monitoring and those things. Now, I think most people, when they think about monitoring, they see this in their mind, right? They see a graph. And that certainly is a large part of monitoring when you think about notifications. But there's a lot more that you can do with monitoring data. Amazon Trusted Advisor is a service that analyzes your AWS resources for common performance optimizations and things like that. So I've got a screenshot of the Trusted Advisor dashboard. The Trusted Advisor is going to do a couple things for you. It's actually going to help identify where you can save money. You can optimize your cost. It's also going to look at maybe how you can improve your performance, right? You may not be surprised that the data that they use to understand this is Amazon CloudWatch data. They're actually using that same data that's generated to give you recommendations to help you save money, to improve the performance. So there are a lot of different use cases. Now, CloudWatch is the product and platform for AWS. We provide a number of capabilities. We're not going to provide every single capability all the time. So there's a large ecosystem of partners. They're in the Amazon Partner Network, these technology partners that provide different capabilities that augment your use. I've got a handful of them. You may have heard of several of these. There are more beyond this. But I just wanted real quickly to mention all of these integrations, and they provide a number of capabilities that span all different things, from actually doing performance analysis, health analysis, evaluating opportunities to save costs, all different kinds of things. All right. That is actually most of my slides, I believe. I'm going to try to switch this over to my demo laptop. Okay, let's see here. Sorry. Disappear for a second. Okay. We looked at slides, we talked about monitoring. Let's just do some monitoring. What I've got here is the Amazon CloudWatch console. For those of you familiar with it, it probably looks familiar. And if you've used it today, you probably used our metrics section here. Let's say that you were trying to plot those graphs that I was showing before. I'm looking at EC2 metrics. You can navigate around with a few clicks. I'm going to search for CPU utilization. And today, I've got a few hosts that are helping me out with part of the demo. I can generate a graph, right? Okay, helpful. I can see my data. I can navigate around. I can zoom in here. I can change the time frames. Very quick and easy to get that data. There's nothing I did to set that up other than launch the instance. Now, we've gotten the feedback that customers want a little bit more flexibility here. This is helpful for sort of maybe some ad hoc investigations, but you need more. Yesterday, we introduced Amazon CloudWatch dashboards. I'm going to keep my talking about it to a minimum and actually just show you what it is. If you go to the Amazon CloudWatch console today, you look on the left-hand side, there's a new little entry that says Dashboards. For those of you familiar with dashboards, it's probably a lot like what you expect. So I'm just going to walk you through what this looks like. I can create a dashboard. Let's see, let's call it my first dashboard. And the first thing that we're going to do after you do that is we're going to ask you what you want to put on this thing. And right now we have a couple widgets. We have a graphing widget, so you can add graphs. You can also add text. I'll talk about both of these, but we'll start with the graphing widget. Now let's go ahead and you'll see that the experience is very similar. I'm going to go ahead and find those metrics that I was using before. Select a couple, and click Create Widget. And there we go. Doesn't look like much, but when you start interacting with this, I can resize this. All the things that you would expect for the dashboard, I can actually change where I'm going to put this. Multiple metrics. And that's it. Now I can save this out. And I now have a dashboard that I can return to. Now, one graph on a dashboard is typically not that interesting. So of course you can add all kinds of graphs on here. I'll do, let's just pick billing metrics for now. By the way, if you didn't know it, we have metrics that tell you about your estimated charges. And there we go. Now, as you expect, you can change the time range on these things. Let's see, let's do 3 days. I can change actually the period that I'm looking at. We'll automatically pick a period for you, so it's kind of a good default setting, but you can always come in here and change it. So I'm going to maybe smooth that out a little bit. If you'll notice, I've got little crosshairs on the graph, and you'll notice the crosshairs actually sync across those two, so I can sort of identify when an issue occurs, I can correlate them across the graphs. If I wanted to isolate something that I'm looking at, let's imagine you have 10 metrics on this graph. You can actually come in here and you can zoom into it, look at that graph that way. You can also isolate the metric on that graph by actually selecting it. You can keep adding these things. You can resize, add as many dashboards as you like. And you can also add a text widget. So I suspect most people are familiar with markup and maybe even markdown. We let you introduce different formatted text in your dashboards with this text widget with the markdown syntax, and I'll show you a little bit here. So we've got this preview pane. We had the sample in there before, if you're familiar with markdown. Say my first dashboard. And I basically created a widget, right? I might want to do something that provides a little bit more information, more than just a label. So I might have a list of things. Okay. Now, a lot of times when I'm in a dashboard, I want to actually go and look at additional information and understand what's going on. So, as you might expect, you can add links. All kinds of links. And I've got one that is too complex for me to type, or at least for you to watch me type. So I'm going to copy and paste. You can also include images. So this is kind of the overview of dashboards. It maybe gives you a little bit of an idea of what you can do with these things. And we'll go ahead and save that out. Now, apologies. Now, let's see here. I'm actually going to show you an application that is live. It's running today. That I'm going to use for the purposes of showing monitoring in CloudWatch. You can go up to the site right now if you'd like. It's cloudwatch-demo.elasticbeanstalk.com. This is an application that I'm running in an auto-scaling group in a VPC. It's currently in the US East 1 region. And I'm actually sending fake load against this site. We'll see some of that in a little bit. I am shipping the logs using the CloudWatch logs agent to CloudWatch, so that I can access the log data without connecting to the hosts. These are auto-scaled hosts. They may stay, they may go away, depending on what's going on. And you can come up here and interact with it yourself. Now, it's not a very interesting site, but it is interactive. Now, what I've done here is I've actually put together another dashboard that shows what you can do and actual used dashboards to monitor a real application. Now, what you'll see up here is I've used the same widgets that I had before. I have a text widget. You'll see a lot of links in here, and we'll talk about what those are. I've added some labels, and I've added my graphs. So now you can see I can very quickly return to all the monitoring information that I'd like to have at hand for my application. Probably have applications that you guys are running and you're constantly monitoring. That's really the scenario that we're after here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and start walking through what each piece of this is and what's actually happening in the application and how we're monitoring that. So I'm going to highlight this first graph here. I'll actually load this. Elastic Beanstalk has something called enhanced monitoring. If you're using Elastic Beanstalk, you can go and enable enhanced monitoring. It's going to provide you things like HTTP responses, the 200s, 400s, all those requests, total request counts. They're going to provide you percentiles on those requests and what the latencies are that you're seeing, P50, P90, P95, all with a click of a button in Beanstalk. And between these two, I now have my requests and my latencies. Now, as I'm looking at this is, in fact, there's a little auto refresh button. I'm going to make sure that's enabled. As I look at this, one thing that I notice is my 4xx errors. Remember, I can isolate those. 4xx means that the resource is not being found. Something's wrong. And with a metric, all I know is that there's a problem. I need a little bit more information. Remember, I said I'm shipping the logs off the box. I actually can quickly go, let's say that I wanted to find out what's going on here. I have my access logs. I provided a link directly to my access logs in CloudWatch logs from this console. And what I'm looking at here now is literally the access logs that are coming off of this box. In fact, they're actually coming off of the entire autoscale group. In this information here, you'll actually be able to see what you would expect in access logs, a web access log. I've got things like IP address, my timestamp, what was being retrieved, and things like user agent, the response code, total bytes transferred, things like that. If I actually look at this, I'm actually already demoing, I guess, something that I'll be looking at next, is I can see what's actually happening. The Amazon Route 53 health check service I'm actually using to check my service. That's something I'm using automatically. Again, I basically just point to an endpoint. My load generator is this guy right here. It's just a Perl script that ramps up and ramps down at different times during the day. But remember, I was looking for my 400s, right? With Amazon CloudWatch logs, I can actually search for those directly. I've got a little syntax that I'm going to copy and paste here. And basically what this is saying is, I want any requests that have the HTTP response code of any level of 400 returned in my results. So I'll go ahead and press enter here. Now what this is actually doing is scanning your logs. This is scanning in your logs. Your actual logs are coming in near real time. So I'm actually going to find all that information. Now the first thing that I might do is come in here and take a quick scan and see if there's anything that really sticks out. I'm kind of looking at this. I was looking at these earlier. I found that there were requests for the fave icon. I don't have a fave icon for this. Okay, I don't care about this so much. But as I start digging through here, I notice something, and that is, let's see, I just saw it. Maybe you guys can see it with me as well. Okay, I just saw it. There it is. I've got a log entry. Now, what I've actually done with the links in my website is I've actually added a little, let's call it a trace. So I've actually stuck a little useful information in here on my links, and I basically have a query string that says source equals index.html menu. So I know where the links are coming from. If I look at this carefully, I actually notice that there's support. It's spelled with one P. And I think about that and I go, oh, shoot. I'd actually deployed this and I had a bad link in this. So this has already helped me identify what the problem was. I can even go back here if I want to isolate this down to the particular resource there. I can go and see all of these. Let's see. search. And there we go. We can start seeing all these errors. Okay, that was my error, right? So that's one that I can go fix now. And I did this fairly simply, just using a couple capabilities. I'm using the Beanstalk checks and the logs to actually identify this error. I can now go make a fix, deploy this, and solve that particular problem. Okay. Let's jump back over here. So I'll go ahead and turn everything back on. Another thing that I was looking at recently, let's look over a little bit more data here. See this green line? That's the total request going to my website. That zigzag line is my load tester. I didn't have a lot of time to add sort of a sinusoidal nice wave, so I just did something really quick based on the time. So it's generating load. Now, as that load increases, and let's change the period here so it's maybe a little bit easier to see. I might expect something like my latency, let's call it my P50 latency, to kind of match with that. Maybe the load increases on that server and my responses start slowing down. What's interesting, I don't know if some of my Beanstalk team members are in here, but we started looking at this yesterday, and one thing that we noticed that was really odd, I don't know if any of you can see this. At the lowest request point, I have some of the highest latencies. Like that did not make any sense to me whatsoever. So just in putting together this demo, we actually identified an issue, and it turns out there's a garbage collector issue. If we go down here, I've actually got the CPU utilization for those particular points in time, and I was seeing little spikes in my CPU utilization. We did a little investigation. We actually found out it was the Java garbage collector. So I actually had a bug in my own software that was causing that. Okay. I did a little bit of a preview earlier. Let's see here. Another feature that you can use with CloudWatch that uses CloudWatch metrics is very straightforward, is the Route 53 latency health checks. What Route 53 latency health checks do is let you check the latency of your endpoints of your publicly facing application. This is a publicly facing application from every region in AWS. I can actually go, without running any code, see what the latency is for my application for users around the world. I mentioned that my application is actually running in the US East 1 region. You can see that the latency is, you can barely see it, right? It's less than 10 milliseconds, right? Kind of expected. If I were to go up here, AP Southeast 2 is our Australian region. And maybe not surprisingly, it takes a little bit of time to get requests there and back. So very quickly I can identify if I have customers in those regions, I can actually improve their experience. And I've learned this just from a few clicks of a button. And there are ways that I can improve that. I can use something like our edge services CloudFront. I may think about replicating into other regions as well. As I'm also looking at this, I noticed a few other things. You'll actually notice that there was a big spike here. And if I was just looking at a latency metric from these checks from that region, I might think there was something wrong with my application, right? But if I actually go and look at my other lines down here, you'll notice that spike doesn't exist. That's a pretty good indicator that there was some network traffic issue. So it's something that's a little bit out of my control, right? Now, one of the things that Route 53 really helps you with is understanding if you've got a problem in your own code or there's some network connectivity issue. So there are two metrics that are particularly useful that get checked from regions around the world, which are the connection time. That's basically how long does it take to actually get that connection. We also do time to first byte. That's really going to tell you how long did it take your application to respond as well. And I can actually go in here and look at differences. So for example, if I happen to be looking at my time to first byte, and I notice, let's jump in here. I notice this little spike here. And if I was just looking at that metric, I might think, oh, did something happen with my application? Well, I can actually go correlate that up here, and I see that I also had a problem with just connections. So that tells me that I've got a network issue. It's outside my control at this point, but I can understand what the problem is. Now, of course, there are things that I can do to help improve the likelihood of that not happening, but that very quickly gives me an idea of what's going on. All right. One last thing I'm going to point out here. CloudWatch logs is available for logs that we vend, VPC flow logs, for example, that we'll ship to you through CloudWatch logs. It's also used for monitoring. Do you want to understand when those 400 errors happen in your own logs? You can do that. You want to understand when the word null reference exception shows up in your logs? We can do that. One of the things that I did here is I actually added a graph called deployment starts. Now I want to show you two graphs. I have the CPU utilization metric for my hosts here that show little spikes. And again, I was saying before we were actually finding some garbage collector issues that were happening, but I also saw these other spikes. Well, these are actually really easy for me to identify now because I can see that I actually had deployments at those times. The box was actually working a lot harder than it normally was from the traffic that was being sent to it. And the traffic was actually still being sent to it. So I still maintained my availability the way I rolled out. We can actually see that those spikes happened. I also could correlate those 400 errors, the problems that I had with the support with 1P, back to these deployments. The way that I'm doing this is I'm actually using CloudWatch logs to publish a metric about my deployments. I'm going to show you what that looks like. I have a link over here to my logs for, it's actually the deployment activity that I'm doing. Let's see. I'm actually going to jump back here. CloudWatch has the notion of log groups, log streams, and log events. A log group you can think of as a sort of logical application group, sort of a tier. It might be your front-end logs. It might be your back-end logs across a horizontally scaled application. You might ship all the, say, access logs into a log group. Within that, we actually have streams, and those can map to the physical resources that they're coming from. We monitor at the application level. That's the group level. So what I can go in and do here is I can create what we call a metric filter. A metric filter is going to give you the ability to spot specific entries in your logs in near real time and publish a metric on it. It's one of the fastest ways that you can get a metric through here. And when I say near real time, we're talking sub 30 seconds. And in certain cases faster. But one of the things that I can do is I can come in here and let's call this, I'm just interested in any time I see the phrase starting activity show up. So I can go ahead and test this. We have a little pattern tester, make sure that you got it right, and we'll actually show you all the entries that had that word in there. Okay. Now that could be my entire deployment metric, is I just want to know when those particular things happen. I can come in here and assign a metric. Turns out that I already have a namespace for my CloudWatch demo, and I might call this something like deployment starts, which is what you saw before. And that's pretty much it. Now, it turns out I already have this metric filter created, so let's go take a quick look at that. I'll just show you what that looks like. I think it's actually this one. There we go. And I can add as many metric filters as I like. I can add alarms to these, so I want to be notified when those particular things happen. It's all fairly easily integrated there. All right. Let me just double check here. I mentioned that I'm actually shipping VPC flow logs for this application to CloudWatch logs. Now, I've provided a link here, let's see, that I can jump to those VPC flow logs. They're pretty dense, right? I can scan these with my eye here. That would be, I probably wouldn't find a lot of information there. Using the metric filters would help me. I could say, start looking at the OKs, the rejects, those sorts of things. But I want to show you something new that we introduced 2 weeks ago. And if you give me just a second, let's see if I can, I think I got to switch my, within the last 2 weeks, we announced the Amazon Elasticsearch service. So many of you have probably seen that. Many of you are probably familiar with Elasticsearch. This is a managed Elasticsearch cluster. Gives you access to a Kibana-style dashboard that you can use. Now, CloudWatch Logs makes it very easy to go set up and quickly monitor the things that you would normally be monitoring, say, in a dashboard. It's relatively stateless, though. It lets you search. It lets you do that real-time monitoring. What if you wanted to add a little analytics on top of that? What we've done is we've actually integrated Amazon Elasticsearch Service and CloudWatch Logs to make it very easy for you to start using Kibana and Elasticsearch on your VPC flow logs or any other logs that come into CloudWatch. So I'm going to walk you through what that looks like really quickly. Okay. Right here, what I'm actually showing is we're back at the CloudWatch console. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. I'm going to go ahead and click on the logs here. This brings me to the log section for CloudWatch. I'm shipping those VPC flow logs in here, and I've given it kind of a funny name. Hang on a second here. It's my re:Invent 2015 demo VPC logs. I'm going to go ahead and select those. I'm going to go up here to this Actions button. For those of you who've seen this Actions button, you'll notice there are a couple new entries in here. I'm going to, let's see, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and click on this, Start Streaming to Amazon Elasticsearch Service. This is going to start me on a set of UIs that are going to walk you through the process of beginning to stream your VPC flow logs, in this particular case, directly to your Elasticsearch cluster. Now, I'll first comment, you need to set up your Elasticsearch, your Amazon Elasticsearch Service cluster before you take this step. That's the first step is actually picking that cluster. You can do that through that console, provide your own customizations. It's quite straightforward. And if you've got that up and running, if I go ahead and click this, we'll automatically find that cluster for you. Okay? Now, the way that we're actually delivering those log events to Elasticsearch is actually by using AWS Lambda. If you're not familiar with it, AWS Lambda lets you write small code snippets, basically, that can be executed as a simple compute job that doesn't require infrastructure. Now, what we need to do here today is we're going to give that Lambda function the permission to actually do these executions. So today, we need an IAM role. We make this relatively easy for you to do here. If you wanted to create a new one, I've got a whole bunch of them here because I've been doing a few of these demos. But you can create this new IAM role, and we'll take you directly to the IAM console. You click OK. We've already preformed it, and it returns you right back here. It's fairly straightforward. In this particular case, I've actually got one already set up that I'm going to use. And I'll just click Next. OK. We've now pointed to the cluster. We've now got the right permissions. If you want to structure your logs for Elasticsearch, we give you an option here. Now, for the common formats that we deliver, you can just pick from this drop-down here. So for example, Amazon VPC flow logs, AWS CloudTrail logs, AWS Lambda, those are all ones. You just select it, and we'll take care of what we call the pattern binding. So for example, if you have an IP address field, we'll actually identify that IP address field for you. You don't even have to think about it, and that will show up in your Elasticsearch cluster. Now, in this particular case, I am using VPC flow logs. Of course, you can choose other options, space-delimited JSON. I know there are a lot of log formats in JSON, sort of a common log format. And there's other, which is basically you can enter your pattern yourself. Now, what we do is we're going to generate that pattern for you. See if I can go ahead and create this. And you can go and customize this if you want. But it's a default. You don't have to touch it if you don't want to. And then we come down here and we just click Next. In this particular case, I'm just using raw VPC flow logs. And I'm going to go ahead and just click Start Streaming. Now, what's starting to happen is CloudWatch Logs is now pushing those events from that group as they show up into that Lambda function. We have generated the Lambda function for you. So you notice there was no code that I had to write. We're generating that Lambda function for you, pointing to that right Elasticsearch cluster. We've got the right permissions. Now from this page, I can actually link directly to my Elasticsearch cluster. See if I can find my mouse. Turns out that Kibana 3 and Kibana 4 are on the Elasticsearch cluster. We provide a little bit more information here for you to learn about. But I'm going to go ahead and show you one that's based on Kibana 3. We have a default dashboard that you can actually load. I'll point to some of these resources at the end. But there's a default dashboard for VPC flow logs, for example. We have a default dashboard for CloudTrail and some other defaults that make it very easy. What you're actually seeing here is I'm seeing the total bytes that are accepted, rejected. I'm actually seeing my top IP addresses here at the bottom. Let's see if we can see that. Based on source, based on ports. So I can really slice and dice the data that I want to provide another level of analytics on top of this. You can go ahead and try this right after this talk. You can try it right now if you like. I won't be offended. But you can go ahead and get started with this today. This is all available. Okay. So I mentioned the Elasticsearch part, and I mentioned the Lambda part. Well, if you don't want the Elasticsearch part and you want to do something else, you can do that too. I'm going to go back over here to my logs. I'm actually going to do some CloudTrail processing. I'm going to show you what I'm doing here. Let's see. Filter, find my CloudTrail. Okay. So the first option I showed you was streaming to Amazon Elasticsearch service. You also see streaming to the Lambda service. It's very similar, but you don't need a cluster for this. You don't need the Elasticsearch cluster. You're going to go through very similar setup. I actually have a function that I've already set up. If you're familiar with Lambda and the Lambda console, you can actually go to the Lambda console and one of the what they call blueprints, which are little code snippets that we've put together to help you integrate with different sources of data. You'll actually find the CloudWatch integration there. And there you're basically doing the same thing. You can also do it from CloudWatch. So here, I'll choose my CloudTrail processor. I'll walk through something very similar that I did before. My format is, in this particular case, CloudTrail. I can apply a format. I'm not actually applying any format in this particular case. It's JSON, which actually makes it much easier to process. And I can start streaming right now. OK. We've created this. We've now actually started streaming to this Lambda function. What is that Lambda function doing? Well, let's see. And this is where I need to switch one more time. I'm going to disappear again for a second. OK. All right, great. I have a handful of Lambda functions in here. I mentioned before that the CloudWatch logs integration is directly in these blueprints for Lambda. So if you're ever just in the Lambda console, you can actually set this up from here as well. You'll see, there it is, CloudWatch logs processing data. What this function is it basically unpacks, it unzips and unpacks and parses out the contents of those logs so that you can start doing stuff with it right away. You don't have to mess with any of that stuff. We'll go ahead and jump over here. Oh, well, here. Let's do it this way. Let's go back here. We'll just jump directly into my Lambda function. OK. Realize this is kind of small. Let's see if I can zoom just a little bit. OK. This is the Lambda function that's going to be executed anytime there are new log events that get sent to CloudWatch logs. This gives me the ability to really run any code that I want to. What I'm actually doing here is something that we hear a lot about. Customers want to know when certain things happen, and they can be very custom things, that are happening and being recorded in log data. So what I've actually done is I've put together a Lambda function that I'm going to walk you through. It's going to do a custom action that's going to give me a notification when I apply a certain policy. I'll show you how that policy is being applied, and that policy is violated. So let's take a look at this. So the first part at the top is really just all the declarations that I need, right? Most of that is boilerplate. A bunch of it's actually introduced when you select the CloudWatch integration blueprint. When you create that new function, you'll see this big block of code. It's boilerplate code. We're just unzipping and formatting the logs in a way that makes it nice to handle after that. Now, this is where you can insert your own code. I'm going to tell you what we're doing here. What I've got is I've actually got a Dynamo table set up, a DynamoDB table. This is our NoSQL database, and I've put into that a dynamic list. It's constantly updating with a set of users or patterns that I'm looking for that might be what, think of it as a policy violation. For example, root users signing in. Maybe I don't really want to see that within my accounts. I never want to see root users signing in, so I'm going to flag that. I might follow up. If it's an organization, I'm going to follow up with that employee. You can imagine all kinds of policies that you could define here. This is a very simple one. So what I'm actually doing is I'm taking the CloudTrail event here, and I'm taking the message and basically parsing it out into JSON. Okay, that's the first thing. The second one is I'm actually identifying the username. So this is actually the structure of the CloudTrail event logs. So we've got a username. That username may be the IAM username that was generated as a temporary user. It may be the root account. Whatever it is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop over that, and I'm actually going to start checking what if that user is in the list of Dynamo users that I'm looking for. For example, root. This, let's see here. I have a check user function. It's actually later down here. It actually shows all the code for interacting with Dynamo. But what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to send a notification over SNS. So now what's happening is in real time, I can process really any type of rule against my log files without any infrastructure. The logs are being shipped to the account. We're shipping the logs to Lambda, and now your code is sending notifications to the people that actually want to know about this. Now, you can imagine the use cases for this. I mean, this is just an example, right? But you can imagine that you're applying much more sophisticated examples, things that are a little bit more stateful. This is almost a stateless application. But you could imagine that you were looking for specific patterns that are relatively complex, things that only your organization is interested in. The integration with Lambda is really where you get that power and capability. Okay. I'm going to switch one more time. Now, I just went over processing, managing, monitoring your logs. And just really quickly, it was kind of an overview of all the things that you can do. First of all, if you're using CloudWatch logs directly, we're going to give you easy monitoring. We give you an agent. You can ship your logs from your EC2 instances or your on-premises servers. We don't care. The agent that we've built runs on all kinds of flavors of Linux. We have a few other agents that integrate with other common types of log generators. It's your choice. It's a really easy way to get up and running and started. Now, if you wanted to do a little bit more, you want to apply that analytics. That's where we introduce the Amazon Elasticsearch Service integration. You can very easily set that up in the AWS console today. If you want to do your own custom processing, we talked about the AWS Lambda integration. We actually support Kinesis as well. You can create a Kinesis stream out. Now, if you're doing Kinesis, what you're going to get there is you're going to need to have a KCL Kinesis client library application that's actually reading off those. So you do have some infrastructure, but it gives you, again, even more options. A few weeks ago, we actually introduced a capability to export to S3. So you can create batch exports to S3 of your logs as well if you want to load them in something completely different. It's really your choice. Each one of these options gives you, really the flexibility that you can manage the logs the way you want to. Okay. We're just about down to 10 minutes. I want to leave a little room for questions. But very quickly, we went over a lot of stuff. It's a lot of detail. This talk is actually recorded. We'll post these later, so if you forgot something, no big deal. You can watch it again, or if you don't ever want to see this talk again, you don't have to watch it again. But we covered CloudWatch and monitoring. We talked about the new feature of CloudWatch dashboards introduced yesterday. We talked about Route 53 health check latency monitoring. We talked about the Beanstalk enhanced monitoring. We talked about the last parts of the Elasticsearch service, the Lambda and the Kinesis integration. Really a number of things to get you started, and there's even more. This is really just to give you a taste. For those of you who are interested in digging in more, I've actually put all of the resources on our demo application. If you go up and find the demo links link here in that menu. I haven't fixed the support one though, so if you want to click on that, I'll find out about the 400s. I should probably fix that today, I guess. The demo links will show you pretty much all the stuff that I've talked about here, including a link to Jeff Barr's blog that has an in-depth review of using VPC flow logs and all the other service that I talked about. Real quickly, if you can't see that link, it's cloudwatch-demo.elasticbeanstalk.com. So you can go up there now, make a note. And then finally, I want to thank everybody for your time today. Please complete the evaluations after the talk. That helps us understand how we can improve these things in the future. Gives me an opportunity to go and improve and polish for the talks next year. And finally, thank you. I hope you guys had a great week at reInvent. I'm going to be around here to answer questions. I don't think there's any hurry to get out of the room, so I'm happy to take lots of questions. Thank you.